My name is Patricia Thompson, and I'm 67 years old, living quietly in Columbus, Ohio. When my son David called to invite me to his housewarming party in California, I felt pure joy. After 3 years of widowhood, visiting family seemed like the perfect escape. But something in David's voice felt forced, and my daughter in law Amanda's coldness over the phone puzzled me. My 12-year-old grandson Jake barely spoke, which was unusual for such a chatty boy. I should have trusted my instincts then. Before I share what happened that terrifying night, tell me where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because this story might save someone's life, just like my grandson saved mine. Now, let me tell you about the night that changed everything. I had been living peacefully in my small house in Columbus since my husband Robert passed away 3 years ago. The grief had finally started to ease, and I was finding my rhythm as a widow. My daily walks, volunteer work at the library, and weekly calls with family kept me grounded. David, my only child, had always been my pride and joy. At 38, he worked as a software engineer and had built what seemed like a successful career. 5 years ago, he moved his family to San Diego for a lucrative position at a major tech company. His wife Amanda, whom he'd been married to for 15 years, had always been warm and welcoming during our visits. Their son Jake was the light of my life. At 12 years old, he was incredibly intelligent, always asking questions about everything from science to history. Our video calls were filled with his excited chatter about school projects and friends. He reminded me so much of David at that age. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March. David's voice carried an odd tension I couldn't quite place. "Mom, we just bought a new house," he said, but his usual excitement was replaced by something that sounded almost rehearsed. "We're having a housewarming party next weekend. We'd love for you to come." I felt a flutter of happiness. A trip to California sounded wonderful, especially with spring arriving in Ohio. "That's fantastic, honey. I'd love to see your new place." When Amanda took the phone, her tone was markedly different from our previous conversations. Gone was the warm chattiness I remembered. Instead, she spoke in clipped sentences about flight arrangements and logistics. "We'll pick you up at the airport Saturday morning. The party is Saturday evening." "Can I talk to Jake?" I asked, eager to hear my grandson's voice. There was a pause before Jake came on the line. "Hi, Grandma," he said quietly. Usually he would launch into stories about school or ask about my garden. This time he simply said, "I can't wait to see you," in a voice that seemed strangely subdued. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling unsettled. Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. Maybe it was just the stress of moving and organizing a party. I pushed the feeling aside and started planning my trip. The flight from Columbus to San Diego gave me time to think. I watched the landscape change below, from the familiar green of Ohio to the desert expanses of the Southwest. My unease grew with each mile. Why had David sounded so strange? Why was Amanda so cold? And Jake's brief responses were completely out of character. When I emerged from the gate at San Diego International Airport, I spotted David immediately. My heart sank. He looked terrible, much thinner than when I'd seen him at Christmas, with dark circles under his eyes. His smile seemed forced as he hugged me. "You look tired, sweetheart," I said, studying his face. "Just busy with the move and work." He replied, quickly avoiding my eyes. "The new house is quite an adjustment." During the 40-minute drive through San Diego's suburban sprawl, I tried to engage him in conversation about his job, but his responses were vague and evasive. When I asked about Amanda's work at the marketing firm, he changed the subject entirely. "Tell me about this new neighborhood," I said, watching the scenery grow more upscale as we drove. "It's very nice," David said simply. "Quiet, safe." His tone suggested the conversation was over, leaving me with more questions than answers. The house took my breath away, but not necessarily in a good way. We pulled into the driveway of an enormous contemporary home in what was clearly an expensive neighborhood. The house was all glass and steel with perfectly manicured landscaping that looked more like a showplace than a family home. David, this is beautiful, but how can you afford this? I asked immediately, regretting the bluntness of my question. We got a good deal, he said quickly. The tech industry pays well out here. But I knew David's salary, and this house had to cost well over $1 million. Something didn't add up. Amanda met us at the front door, and I was struck again by how much she'd changed. The woman who used to greet me with warm hugs now offered only a stiff smile and a brief embrace. She'd lost weight, and her face had a pinched, worried look that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Welcome to our new home, Patricia," she said formally. Even her use of my first name felt wrong. She'd called me Mom for years. Jake appeared in the doorway behind his mother, and my heart lifted. But when he hugged me, I felt his small body trembling slightly. His eyes, when he looked up at me, held an expression I'd never seen before: fear. "Hey there, buddy," I said, keeping my voice light. "Ready to show Grandma around this amazing house?" "Maybe later," Amanda interjected quickly. "Jake has homework to finish." As David showed me through the house, I couldn't shake my growing unease. The place was beautiful, but felt more like a museum than a home. There was something clinical about the furniture placement, as if everything had been staged. More disturbing were the security features. Every door had multiple deadbolts, and the windows were fitted with decorative iron bars that looked more functional than ornamental. Cameras were mounted in every corner, their red lights blinking constantly. "Wow, you really take security seriously," I commented as we passed another camera. Amanda appeared at David's shoulder. "This neighborhood has had some break-in issues," she said quickly. "We wanted to be safe, especially with Jake." But when I looked out the windows, I saw other houses in the neighborhood with simple, normal security setups. None had the fortress-like appearance of David's home. David's tour carefully avoided certain areas of the house. When I asked about a hallway that led toward the back, he said it was just storage and his home office. "Nothing interesting back there, Mom." The basement was off-limits entirely. "Still getting it organized," Amanda explained when I mentioned it. Throughout the afternoon, I noticed how Amanda and David seemed to be watching each other constantly, as if communicating through glances. Jake stayed close to me whenever possible, but every time he seemed about to say something private, one of his parents would appear and redirect him elsewhere. During lunch, I tried to engage them in normal family conversation, but their responses felt scripted. When I asked about Jake's school, Amanda answered for him. When I inquired about David's work projects, he gave vague non-answers about routine development tasks. The strangest moment came when Jake dropped his fork and bent to pick it up. As he straightened, he looked directly at me and mouthed the word, "Help." My blood ran cold, but when I looked at his parents, they seemed oblivious to what had just happened. That afternoon, while Amanda prepared for the evening's party, I found myself alone with David in the kitchen. This was my chance to find out what was really going on. "Son, are you in some kind of trouble?" I asked directly. David's hands stilled on the wine glasses he was arranging. For a moment, I thought he might tell me the truth. His shoulders sagged, and he looked older than his 38 years. "Mom, He started, then stopped as Amanda appeared in the doorway. "David, we need to discuss the catering setup," she said sharply. The moment was lost, but I'd seen enough to know my instincts were right. My son was terrified, and so was his family. As evening approached, I retreated to the guest room to change for the party. The room was beautiful, but felt impersonal, like a hotel suite. As I put on my navy dress, I tried to make sense of what I was observing. The first guests arrived at 7 o'clock, and immediately I knew this wasn't a normal housewarming party. Instead of neighbors, co-workers, and friends, the guests were all middle-aged men in expensive suits. They had the hard look of people accustomed to getting their way through intimidation rather than charm. Amanda introduced me to each guest with an odd formality. "This is David's mother, Patricia, visiting from Ohio," she would say, as if she were presenting me for inspection. The men's handshakes lingered too long, and their eyes appraised me in a way that made my skin crawl. One man, introduced simply as Marcus, seemed to be the leader of this group. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair and cold blue eyes. When Amanda introduced us, he held my hand longer than necessary. "So you're David's mother," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "Amanda's told us so much about you. You live alone in Ohio, is that right?" "Yes, in Columbus," I replied, trying to pull my hand free. "And does anyone know you're visiting California this weekend?" The question sent chills down my spine. "My neighbor is watching my mail," I said carefully. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. How nice to have good neighbors. Ohio is so far from here, isn't it? Quite isolated. David appeared at my elbow, with a drink, his hands shaking so badly I was afraid he'd spill it. I'd never seen my son drink heavily, but throughout the evening, he seemed to be consuming alcohol at an alarming rate. The conversations I overheard among the guests were nothing like typical party chatter. They spoke in low voices about shipments from the south, cleaning up loose ends, and the warehouse situation. When I approached any group, their conversations would immediately shift to bland topics like the weather or the house's architecture. Amanda hovered near me constantly, never allowing me to be alone with any of the guests or even with David. Her smile looked painted on, and I noticed her hands trembling whenever she thought no one was looking. Around 9 o'clock, Jake appeared at the top of the stairs in his pajamas. "I wanted to say goodnight to Grandma," he announced. Marcus looked up from his conversation. "What a polite young man," he said. "Come here, Jake." I watched Jake walk slowly toward Marcus, and I could see the boy's reluctance in every step. Marcus put a heavy hand on Jake's shoulder. "Your grandmother seems like a very nice lady," Marcus said. "I bet she's proud to have such a smart grandson." Jake nodded but said nothing. "Smart boys know when to keep family business private, don't they?" Marcus continued, his grip tightening on Jake's shoulder. "Yes, sir," Jake whispered. When Jake hugged me goodnight, he pressed close to my ear. "Grandma, I'm scared," he whispered so quietly, I almost missed it. "These aren't Dad's friends." Before I could respond, Amanda was there, pulling Jake away. "Time for bed, sweetie. You have soccer practice tomorrow." As Amanda led Jake upstairs, I caught Marcus watching me intently. Had he heard Jake's whisper? His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made me feel like prey, being stalked by a predator. The conversations grew more explicit as the evening wore on, and the men consumed more alcohol. I heard references to moving product across the border, dealing with witnesses, and cleaning house. When one man mentioned, "The storage facility needs to be emptied soon," Marcus shot him a sharp look and nodded in my direction. "We should be more careful about our business discussions," Marcus said loudly enough for me to hear. "We have a guest." The implication was clear. I was hearing things I shouldn't be hearing. Around 11 o'clock, the guests began to leave. Each one said goodbye to me with the same unsettling intensity, as if they were memorizing my face. Marcus was the last to leave. "I hope we'll see you again soon, Patricia," he said once again, holding my hand too long. "David, we'll be in touch about our discussion." After the door closed behind the last guest, the house fell into an oppressive silence. David immediately poured himself then another drink, his hands still shaking. Amanda began cleaning up with mechanical efficiency, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "Well, that was interesting," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Quite a diverse group of friends. They're business associates," David said shortly, "from my consulting work." But David had never mentioned consulting work, and these men clearly weren't software developers or tech industry professionals. I excused myself early, claiming exhaustion from travel. As I lay in the guest bed, I could hear David and Amanda's voices through the thin walls, though I couldn't make out their words. The tone was urgent and argumentative, with Amanda's voice occasionally rising to an angry whisper. Around midnight, their voices stopped, but I couldn't sleep. Everything about this visit felt wrong, and Jake's frightened whisper echoed in my mind. Whatever was happening in this house, my family was in danger, and somehow I was now part of it. I lay in bed pretending to sleep, but my mind raced with growing alarm. Around 1 in the morning, I heard David and Amanda's voices again, this time coming from directly below my room. Their argument had resumed, and now I could make out some of their words. "I can't do this to my mother." David's voice was anguished. "There has to be another way." "You don't have a choice," Amanda replied sharply. "Marcus made that very clear tonight. She heard too much. But she's my mother, and Jake is our son. Do you want him to grow up without a father because you couldn't make a hard decision?" My blood turned to ice. They were talking about me, and whatever they were planning, it wasn't good. I strained to hear more, but their voices dropped to urgent whispers. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps in the hallway, and the soft sound of a door closing. Then Amanda's voice came through clearly, and I realized she must be on the phone. "It's done," she said quietly. "She knows too much about the operation. We can't let her go back to Ohio." There was a pause then. "Tomorrow morning before she wakes up, make it look like an accident." I stopped breathing. They were planning to kill me. I waited another 10 minutes, listening to the house settle into silence before slipping out of bed. My heart pounded as I crept toward the door, every creak of the floorboards sounding like thunder in the quiet house. I had to get to Jake. If they were planning to hurt me, my grandson might be in danger too, or at least he might know more about what was happening. Jake's room was at the end of the hall. I turned the doorknob, slowly praying it wouldn't squeak. The room was dark, but I could see Jake's small form in the bed. "Jake," I whispered. "It's Grandma." He sat up immediately, as if he'd been awake and waiting. "Grandma, I knew you'd come." I sat on the edge of his bed, and in the dim light from his digital clock, I could see his frightened face clearly. "Jake, I need you to tell me what's going on. Who were those men tonight?" Jake looked toward his bedroom door nervously, then scooted closer to me. "They're bad men, Grandma. Mom and Dad owe them money, lots of money. Dad was gambling, and when he couldn't pay, these men made him do bad things." "What kind of bad things?" "They made Dad help them bring drugs from Mexico. Our house is like a storage place. That's why we had to move here, so the police in Ohio wouldn't find Dad." The pieces were falling into place. David's gambling addiction, the expensive house they couldn't afford, the strange security features, the mysterious guests. My son was being used by a drug trafficking operation. "Jake, did you hear them talking about me tonight?" Jake nodded miserably. "They said you saw too much, and you can't go home. They said they have to clean up loose ends before someone gets suspicious." "Do you know what that means?" Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "I think they want to hurt you, Grandma. Just like they hurt the other man who tried to leave." "What other man?" "There was a man named Tommy who used to help them. When he said he wanted out, they made him disappear. Dad was really scared after that." I pulled Jake close, my mind racing. We were both in immediate danger, and David and Amanda were either willing participants or too terrified to protect us. "Jake, I need your help. We have to get out of here tonight." Jake nodded vigorously. "I've been thinking about it. I know how to turn off the cameras from Dad's computer, and I know about the tunnel." "What tunnel?" "There's a passage from the basement to the backyard. That's how Marcus and his men move the drugs without the neighbors seeing. If we can get down there, we can get outside and take one of their cars." "Do you know where your parents keep car keys?" "There's a spare set in the kitchen drawer for the Honda in the garage." "But Grandma, we have to be really careful. Marcus has men watching the house at night." I looked at my brave grandson, this 12-year-old boy, who had been living with this terror while trying to protect his family. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's going to be dangerous." "Grandma, if we don't try, something bad is going to happen to you tomorrow. And maybe to me too, because I know too much now." He was right. We had no choice. "Okay, here's what we'll do," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "You go to your father's office and shut down the camera system. I'll get the car keys and meet you at the basement door." Do you know how to get to the tunnel? Jake nodded. I've seen them use it. It comes out behind the big tree in the backyard near where they park the cars. And then what? We take the Honda and drive to the police station. I know where it is. We passed it on the way from the airport. It was a simple plan, maybe too simple, but it was all we had. Give me 5 minutes to get to the kitchen, then you go to the office. Be as quiet as you can. Jake hugged me tightly. Grandma, what if something happens to Mom and Dad? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, we need to save ourselves so we can help them later. I slipped out of Jake's room and made my way slowly toward the kitchen. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every small sound made me freeze in terror. The house's expensive fixtures and pristine decor now felt like elements of a beautiful prison. The kitchen was bathed in moonlight from the large windows. I found the drawer Jake had mentioned and carefully slid it open. Inside, among the usual household items, were several sets of keys. I grabbed what looked like car keys for a Honda and slipped them into my pocket. As I turned to leave, I heard a soft electronic beeping from somewhere in the house. Jake must have accessed the camera system. I prayed he knew what he was doing. I made my way toward the basement door, which was located off the main hallway. As I passed the living room, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Through the front window, I could see a car parked across the street with two figures inside. Marcus hadn't trusted David and Amanda to handle the situation alone. The basement door was unlocked, and I slipped through it, closing it quietly behind me. The stairs creaked ominously as I descended into the darkness. At the bottom, I felt along the wall for a light switch, but when I found it, I hesitated. Light might be visible from outside. Instead, I used the flashlight app on my phone, keeping the beam low and dim. What I saw in the basement confirmed Jake's story, and worse. One entire wall was lined with industrial shelving, containing dozens of packages wrapped in plastic. Even without opening them, I knew I was looking at a significant drug storage operation. But there was more. A desk in the corner held documents, and even in the dim light of my phone, I could see maps of border crossing points, lists of names, and what appeared to be financial records. David wasn't just storing drugs. He was involved in the entire operation. "Grandma," Jake's whisper came from behind me. I turned to see him creeping down the stairs. "Did you turn off the cameras?" "Yes, but I could only disable them for 30 minutes before the system automatically reboots. We need to hurry." Jake led me to what appeared to be a utility closet, but when he opened it, I saw it was actually the entrance to a tunnel. The passage was narrow, but high enough for us to walk through if we ducked slightly. "This goes all the way to the backyard," Jake whispered. "But Grandma, there's something else you need to know." "What?" "I heard Marcus talking to his men earlier. He's not just planning to hurt you. He's planning to hurt Mom and Dad too, once this shipment is moved. He doesn't trust them anymore." The full horror of the situation hit me. Marcus was planning to eliminate witnesses, and that included my entire family. We entered the tunnel, Jake leading the way with my phone's flashlight. The passage was roughly constructed, clearly dug recently, and probably without permits. It smelled of damp earth and something else I didn't want to identify. After what felt like forever, but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes, Jake stopped. "We're at the end," he whispered. "The exit is behind a fake tree stump." Jake pushed upward on what looked like solid ground, and a section of earth lifted away, revealing that we were indeed behind a large decorative stump in the backyard. The ingenious camouflage was invisible from the house or street. We emerged into the cool night air, and I had never been so grateful to breathe freely. But our relief was short-lived. The backyard was not empty. Marcus stood near the garage, talking quietly into a cell phone. Even worse, I could see at least 2 other men positioned around the property. They weren't just watching the house, they were preparing for something. Jake and I crouched behind the fake stump, hardly daring to breathe. Marcus was only about 20 yards away, close enough that we could hear part of his conversation. "No, we move tonight." he was saying. The old woman knows too much, and David is becoming unreliable. Clean slate, all of them. He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. Make it look like a family tragedy. Murder, suicide, domestic dispute gone wrong. The neighbors will tell police David had been under stress lately. Jake's small hand gripped mine tightly. We were hearing our own death sentence being planned. Marcus ended his call and walked toward the house. This was our chance, but we'd have to be incredibly careful. The men positioned around the property were professionals, and they'd shoot first if they spotted us. Jake, where's the Honda parked? I whispered. In the garage, but the garage door is electric. If we open it, everyone will hear. What about the other cars? Jake pointed toward the street. Marcus and his men drove 3 cars. They're parked right in front of the house. Taking one of Marcus's cars was risky, but it might be our only option. If we could get to the street without being seen, we might have a chance. Stay low and follow me, I whispered to Jake. We began creeping along the edge of the property, using the landscaping for cover. The expensive outdoor lighting that had seemed so elegant earlier now felt like searchlights that might expose us at any moment. We had almost reached the side of the house when disaster struck. My foot caught on a sprinkler head hidden in the grass, and I stumbled, knocking over a decorative garden ornament. The crash seemed to echo across the entire neighborhood. Immediately, shouts erupted from around the property. Movement in the backyard, someone yelled. Go, I whispered urgently to Jake. We ran toward the front of the house, abandoning any pretense of stealth. Behind us, I could hear Marcus shouting orders and the sound of men running across the lawn. We reached the street just as the front door of the house burst open. David appeared, and for a moment I thought he was coming to help us. Then I saw Marcus behind him, pushing him forward with what looked like a gun pressed to his back. Patricia, Marcus called out. There's no point in running. We have your son. I stopped, my heart breaking as I saw David's terrified face, but Jake tugged on my hand. Grandma, we have to keep going. It's the only way to save Dad. The boy was right. If we were captured now, Marcus would kill all of us. Our only hope was to get to the police. I could see Marcus's cars parked along the street, but I also saw one of his men running toward them, trying to cut off our escape route. We needed a different plan. The neighbor's car, Jake pointed to a driveway across the street, where an older sedan sat with its windows down. It was a desperate chance, but it might work. We ran across the street as gunshots rang out behind us. Marcus was no longer concerned with keeping things quiet. I thanked my late husband for insisting I learn how to hotwire a car during my youth when money was tight and we sometimes had to recover our own repossessed vehicles. The skill I hadn't used in 40 years came flooding back as I dove into the front seat of the neighbor's car. Grandma, they're coming! Jake jumped into the passenger seat as I worked frantically with the wires under the dashboard. The engine turned over just as Marcus reached the car. He grabbed the door handle, but I gunned the engine and swerved away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I saw him raising his gun, but we were already moving too fast and erratically for him to get a clear shot. Where's the police station? I asked Jake as we fled through the suburban streets. Turn left at the next intersection, then straight for about 2 miles. Behind us, I could see headlights gaining rapidly. Marcus and his men were pursuing us, and their cars were much faster than our stolen sedan. I pressed the accelerator to the floor, praying we could reach safety before they caught us. The chase through San Diego's suburban streets was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Marcus's cars stayed close behind us, and I could see the drivers taking risks that showed they were desperate to stop us before we reached the police. At an intersection, one of their vehicles tried to ram us from the side, but I swerved just in time, mounting the curb briefly before getting back on the road. Jake was remarkably calm for a 12-year-old in a high-speed chase, giving me clear directions while watching our pursuers. Grandma, there's a shortcut through the shopping center, Jake said as we approached a large retail complex. If we can get through there, We can lose them. I turned sharply into the parking lot, our tires squealing. The shopping center was closed at this hour, so the lot was nearly empty, but the layout provided cover from our pursuers. I drove between rows of parked cars, using them as obstacles. One of Marcus's cars followed us into the lot, but the driver misjudged the turn and crashed into a light pole. That left two vehicles still chasing us. We emerged from the other side of the shopping center onto a main thoroughfare. I could see the police station ahead, its lit sign like a beacon of hope. But Marcus's remaining cars were closing in, and I realized they were going to try to ram us before we could reach safety. "Hold on, Jake," I said, making a decision that terrified me. Instead of slowing down as we approached the police station, I accelerated and drove straight through the glass doors of the lobby. The crash was tremendous. Glass exploded around us and the car's airbags deployed. But we were alive and definitely inside a police station. The desk sergeant dove for cover behind his counter, then immediately reached for his radio. "Officer down." "No, wait. Civilians in distress. We need backup and medical immediately." Jake and I climbed out of the wreckage, bruised but essentially unharmed. Through the gaping hole where the doors used to be, we could see Marcus's car speeding away. "Ma'am, what in the hell is going on?" the desk sergeant demanded. "My name is Patricia Thompson, and this is my grandson Jake Wilson. We need FBI involvement immediately. We have information about a major drug trafficking operation, and our lives are in immediate danger." The next few hours passed in a blur of interviews, medical examinations, and coordination between local police and federal agents. Jake and I were taken to a secure area of the police station, while officers were dispatched to David's house. What they found there confirmed our worst fears. David and Amanda had been shot, but thankfully they were still alive when paramedics arrived. They had been tortured for information about our whereabouts. Before Marcus realized we weren't coming back, FBI agent Sarah Martinez took our statements personally. She was a woman in her 40s with kind but sharp eyes, and she listened intently as Jake and I recounted everything we had experienced. "You're both incredibly brave," Agent Martinez said after we finished our account. "Your quick thinking probably saved not just your lives, but your son and daughter-in-law's lives as well." She explained that Marcus Volkov was a person of interest in several federal investigations involving drug trafficking from Mexico. The FBI had been trying to build a case against his organization for years, but witnesses had a tendency to disappear. "Your son and his family were caught in an impossible situation," Agent Martinez continued. "David made some poor financial decisions with gambling, and Volkov's organization exploited that debt to force him into their operation. It's more common than you might think." Jake spoke up. "What's going to happen to my mom and dad? They're going to recover from their injuries," Agent Martinez assured him. "And because they were acting under duress, they'll likely be treated as victims rather than criminals. But they'll need to cooperate fully with our investigation." Over the following days, the scope of Volkov's operation became clear. The house David's family had been living in was one of several properties used for drug storage and distribution. The FBI raids that followed our escape led to arrests across 3 states and the seizure of millions of dollars in drugs and cash. David and Amanda spent several weeks in the hospital recovering from their injuries. When I was finally allowed to see David, he broke down completely. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I never wanted you to get caught up in this. When they said they were going to kill you, I tried to argue, but they said they'd kill Jake if I didn't cooperate." I held my son as he cried, this grown man who had been reduced to a frightened child by circumstances beyond his control. "You were trying to protect your family," I told him. "I understand." The federal prosecutors offered David and Amanda a deal: complete cooperation in exchange for witness protection and reduced sentences. They would have to testify against Volkov and his organization, which meant leaving their old lives behind entirely. "We'll have to move somewhere else, use different names," David explained to me during one of our supervised visits. We won't be able to contact you directly for a while, maybe years. It was heartbreaking, but I understood it was the price of safety. Volkov's organization had a long reach, and there would likely be attempts at retaliation. Jake was the hero of the entire situation. FBI agents were amazed by his quick thinking and courage throughout the ordeal. His knowledge of his father's computer system and the house's layout had been crucial to our escape. That boy saved your life, Agent Martinez told me. But more than that, he helped us bring down an organization that was responsible for trafficking hundreds of kilograms of narcotics into this country. The trial proceedings took months. I had to testify about what I witnessed at the housewarming party and during our escape. Seeing Marcus Volkov in the courtroom dressed in an orange jumpsuit instead of an expensive suit was deeply satisfying. He was eventually sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Several of his associates received lengthy sentences as well. The judge specifically mentioned that our testimony had been crucial in establishing the scope of the organization's activities. A year has passed since that terrifying night in San Diego, and I'm back in my quiet house in Columbus. The ordeal left me changed in ways I'm still discovering. I'm more cautious now, more aware of the darkness that can lurk beneath seemingly normal suburban facades. Jake writes to me regularly from their new location. I can't say where they are or what names they're using now, but he's adjusting well to their new life. His letters are full of stories about his new school, new friends, and his continued fascination with technology. He wants to work for the FBI someday, inspired by the agents who helped us. David calls every few weeks through secure channels arranged by the U.S. Marshal Service. He sounds stronger now, more like the son I remember from before gambling took over his life. He's in counseling and working a regular job under his new identity. Amanda has found work too, and they're slowly rebuilding their relationship after the trauma they endured. The hardest part is not knowing when or if I'll see them again in person. The Witness Protection Program doesn't allow for normal family visits, especially when ongoing threats from Volkov's former associates still exist. Agent Martinez checks in with me occasionally, and she assures me that my family is safe, but the separation is painful. I've learned things about myself that I never expected. I discovered that a 67-year-old widow from Ohio could outrun dangerous criminals and think clearly in life-threatening situations. I learned that love for family can give you courage you didn't know you possessed. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts. From the moment I heard something odd in David's voice, during that first phone call, my subconscious was trying to warn me that something was wrong. In the past, I might have dismissed those feelings as imagination or paranoia. Now I know better. The experience also taught me about the hidden struggles families face. David's gambling addiction and the shame he felt about it nearly destroyed everyone I loved. If he had been able to ask for help earlier before Marcus Volkov's organization got their hooks into him, none of this would have happened. I've started volunteering with a local organization that helps families dealing with gambling addiction. I share my story with spouses and children who are watching their loved ones spiral into destructive behavior. Sometimes, knowing that someone else has survived the worst-case scenario gives them hope. The community in Columbus has been incredibly supportive. My neighbors, who initially worried when I suddenly disappeared for several months, rallied around me when they learned what had happened. Mrs. Henderson next door brings me soup every Tuesday. Mr. Garcia across the street keeps an eye on my house when I travel to visit my sister in Florida. But perhaps the most important thing I've learned is about the resilience of children. Jake showed courage and intelligence beyond his years during our ordeal. He protected me when the adults in his life couldn't, and he never lost faith that we would find a way to survive. Children are often more perceptive than we give them credit for. Jake had recognized that something was terribly wrong in his family's situation long before I arrived in California. He had been preparing for the possibility that he might need to take action to protect the people he loved. His whispered warning at the housewarming party saved both our lives. If he hadn't had the courage to speak up, if I hadn't listened to his fears, Marcus Volkov would have succeeded in eliminating all the witnesses to his operation. I think often about that moment when Jake first whispered to me that he was scared. It would have been so easy to dismiss his concerns as childhood anxiety about moving to a new house. Adults often underestimate children's ability to sense danger, to recognize when the smiles around them are fake, and the safety they're promised is an illusion. Every day, I'm grateful for Jake's bravery and intelligence. A 12-year-old boy saw through the deception that had trapped his parents and found a way to save us all. He reminds me that heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. The bonds between our family members have been tested in ways I never could have imagined, but they've also been strengthened. David, Amanda, Jake, and I survived something that tears many families apart. We protected each other when it mattered most, even when it meant risking our own lives. As I sit in my kitchen in Columbus writing letters to my grandson and waiting for those precious phone calls from my son, I'm at peace with the choices we made that night. We chose courage over compliance, action over resignation, and family loyalty over personal safety. The price we paid was high, but the alternative would have been losing each other forever. Sometimes love requires us to take desperate risks, and sometimes those risks are the only things that can save us. What happened to us could happen to any family. Financial desperation, addiction, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time can drag innocent people into dangerous situations. The important thing is recognizing when you're in danger and having the courage to act even when the people around you seem frozen by fear. Trust your instincts, listen to the children in your life, and remember that sometimes the most ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage when the people they love are threatened. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to trust your instincts in a dangerous situation? Has a child in your life ever surprised you with their perception or courage? Please share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more true stories of survival and family resilience. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that even in our darkest moments, we're stronger than we think. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you and your loved ones always find the courage to protect each other when it matters most. Sometimes the whispered warnings of those we love most can be the difference between tragedy and survival.